Thank you, Minister. I'll try to be. I will be brief. There's a lot, obviously, that you've covered in your presentation. Not all of it I can cover here in my questions, but I do recognise that your commitment to advice and guidance of the committee. And you have done so in the past. So, as part of your submission here today, you mentioned the situation in Yemen, which in Yemen obviously is a catastrophic human rights tragedy, and the ongoing conflict there, which I think in the main is supported, in fairness, by Saudi Arabia also. And I just want to return to one item that we have discussed before, and a general item, because I've given up actually getting a response as to how we voted on the UN Commission on the Status of Women. I see from responses to my parliamentary questions that it appears that you've alluded to the fact that we actually did support Saudi Arabia in their accession to that committee, because you stated in a response that your department had received no representations seeking Ireland oppose Saudi Arabia's accession to that. So, in light of the fact that the Saudis are one of the main protagonists in the ongoing conflict in Yemen and the terrible tragedies that are occurring there, can I ask that the department would undertake a review of our policy of keeping private all votes as UN commissions? You notice that there are numerous elections across a range of bodies in the UN. I accept that. And I think there are items sometimes whereby, if national security or important strategic interest is at stake, whereby it may be necessary that Ireland would keep how it votes in those elections private. But memberships of committees should not be kept private, in my view, and certainly the UN Commission on the Status of Women. And I think we need to look at this policy into the future. And I do recognise, to be fair, you have said to me that this has been a standard practice over generations. It doesn't mean it's correct, and it doesn't mean it's correct in all instances either. And I really want to see that maybe this committee could look at that, Chairman, as well, as to proposing new procedures in place. And what I really want to know is, across these... I don't know if that matter or always at the Foreign Affairs Council, so we might stick to if it didn't, it should, right? And all I'd just say to conclude on this is, I just wonder what interaction the department or the people who are actually voting on behalf of Ireland actually have with you, Minister, prior to the votes, or with your officials. Or are we just assuming that they're going to do the right thing? So, look, I leave that element of it. I do want to ask a couple of very quick questions, particularly around the area of the European Consensus on Development and what appears to be, Mr Gaffey is here as well, what appears to be, and you might be able to correct, a move towards tying overseas development aid, not by us, and I know you're shaking your head, and we have an excellent track record in that. But just wondering that it looks like, from an EU perspective, that there's a focus on development cooperation towards security, commercial, migration objectives and those type of things. Obviously, I think our stance as a country has always been untied overseas development aid. It should always remain the same. I'm wondering, Minister, has that been discussed at the Foreign Affairs Council in any detail? And Ireland, I think, can take a very good lead in that, because our track record, I believe, is excellent. I think I do want to turn very quickly to the issue of Palestine and the occupied territories in particular. And I want to know, at the Foreign Affairs Council, have our EU foreign ministers discussed the issue of destruction of EU-funded property by the Israeli armed forces, both in the occupied territories? We've had medical facilities, schools, other EU-funded facilities that have been destroyed, and that is a big issue, and I think the EU should speak in one voice. And I have engaged with your officials over the last couple of weeks to try to advance further Ireland's position with regard to the recognition of the state of Palestine as part of a two-state solution as well. And I wonder, from an EU perspective, Minister, you might be able to give a view here. Firstly, our government moving closer to doing that? I think it would be helpful. I think it would be helpful if we actually put our money where our mouth was and actually said, you know what, that Palestine does have equal status to the State of Israel, that we recognise both states formally, and I think we should get off the fence eventually and do that. I don't want us to do anything that would be detrimental to new discussions that may take place. And I recognise the visit of the US President to the region and his call and others' calls for re-engagement. So I just want to get a sense from yourself, Minister, as to where you see that at this moment in time. There's loads of other items I would cover, Chairman, but I'll accede to your request that due to time constraints we won't, but I'm sure we'll have other opportunities, Minister, maybe when we're not so constrained time-wise, that we could actually deal with some of the many items here in more detail. So thanks again for your presentation.
Thanks, Deputy O'Brien. Deputy O'Sullivan.